Good evening, everyone. We are so excited to have you all here. My name is Dr. Kristen Brennison. I am the director of NIU STEAM. And on behalf of NIU STEAM in the Division of Outreach, Engagement, and Regional Development, as well as the Department of Interdisciplinary Health Professionals in the College of Health and Human Sciences, I am so pleased to welcome you here tonight and to welcome Dr. Temple Grandin here. We are very thankful for all of the support that we have had. I'd like to first thank all of the exhibitors, both our NIU and our community members, who are here as part of our celebration of neurodiversity. Thank you all. Hopefully you enjoyed the exhibits and got some good resources. I would also like to take a moment to thank the Westside Children's Therapy for providing the sensory zone in the Sandberg Auditorium and for providing the resources to live stream in that room. I would like to invite one of our students to the stage, Zach Seeker. He is the president of the Student Occupational Therapy Association.
Hello, everyone. I am Zach Seeker, president of NIU's Student Occupational Therapy Association, and on behalf of Northern Illinois University, welcome you to this evening's presentation. I would like to thank NIU's College of Health and Human Sciences, the School of Interdisciplinary Health Professions, and NIU STEAM for sponsoring tonight's presentation. Additionally, I want to thank NIU STEAM for sponsoring and coordinating tonight's celebration of Neurodiversity Resource and Activity Fair that took place just outside the ballroom. Tonight, I have the honor and pleasure to introduce a prominent figure in both the agricultural and autism advocacy fields, a professor, an author, and the inspiration for the Emmy and Golden Globe winning HBO film. She has been a professor of animal science at Colorado State University for 34 years and continues teaching, conducting research, and is a prolific writer of her work at the university. The list of accolades that she has earned continues, including recently being named a Colorado State University Distinguished Professor and induction into the Colorado Authors Hall of Fame. Tonight, our guest will provide insight into her experience with autism, as well as advocate for all types of minds and ways of thinking. Thank you, and please help me in welcoming Dr. Temple Grandin.
Well, it's great to be here tonight, and I'm going to have to face away from her because I have problems with, this is one of my sensory things, seeing emotion. So I will have to stand here. I'm sorry about that. But there are some things where I have problems with distraction from rapid motion. Okay, so we just demonstrated some sensory things. If you could stand back, I'd really appreciate it. Okay, no, because this is where I cannot screen out rapid motion. I have problems with tension shifting slowness. So I've just seen that demonstrated right now. And, okay, that's an accommodation I need. So this brings up a really important thing about accommodation. You know, people often talk about this in a way too general way. But I have problems with getting distracted, especially by rapid motion. And there's some accommodations. You're going to need extra time on tests, putting things in checklist formats. These are things that can really, really help. And I like to figure out the simple things. But the problem is the rapid motion attracts my attention, and then that breaks my thought pattern. Like I've had problems with a real hot auditorium. Somebody had a program, and they were fanning themselves just right there in front of me. Or a photographer constantly walking back and forth. Now, if they do it in the back of the room, it doesn't bother me. But you just saw a little sensory thing. The problems with attention shifting slowness. Now, that's my book, Visual Thinking. And I'm going to be talking tonight about how we need the skills of people on the autism spectrum. I've spent 25 years in construction supervising installation of cattle handling facilities. I worked with people that owned big welding shops and machine shops who were definitely autistic, and they're not getting replaced. We need the skills. It's that simple. We need the skills of people who think differently. Now, the first step is realizing that people think differently. And I was shocked to find out that other people didn't think in pictures the same way I think. I thought everybody thought in pictures. My mind kind of works like little phone pictures on my phone. Things that interest me, I take a picture of it. And then that's stashed in memory. Well, details. Autistic people notice details. This is a sign at the Denver airport that made me laugh my head off. Why is this sign so funny, telling me not to leave my headphones and things like that behind security? Take a look at the boarding pass. Area 51, Gate 51. The key fob has a flying saucer on it. Yeah. Now, being a visual thinker really helped me in my work with animal behavior. Because the first thing I did in animal behavior was to look at what the cattle were seeing. And people thought that was weird, to look at what cattle were seeing. So look at this chute right here. Look at the reflection on the floor. That's going to make the cattle stop. 2 hours later, that reflection may be gone. It was obvious to me. But the people who thought verbally, it wasn't so obvious. There's 3 different ways of thinking. And a lot of people are mixtures. And in my book, Visual Thinking, and there's research that shows that different kinds of thinking actually do exist. I'm an object visualizer. That's the correct scientific name for my kind of thinking. And people with my kind of mind are good with mechanical equipment. I know 2 people I worked with that own great big shops who are definitely autistic, and 20 patents. It's all mechanical stuff. Art, graphic design, working with animals, and one of the best places for my kind of mind is the high-end skilled trades. Electrical, plumbing, building things, building industrial equipment. Yeah, they're going to need some people to keep the heating and cooling going on in that data center. Yeah, they need the computer people to understand the computers, but my kind of mind's going to have to keep those computers from frying. Yeah. You see, this is where you need to have both kinds of thinkers. And then we're going to need object visualizers to fix things. As I travel around, I'm finding broken escalators, broken elevators everywhere I go. Because the people that can be fixing them have been retired out. Elevators have got really cool mechanism, super cool mechanisms. One of the coolest ones is you go down the escalator to go into the customs at Toronto. Yeah, I didn't dare take a picture of it. It was too close to customs, but the coolest mechanism. And you got to get kids out and show them interesting stuff so they get interested in interesting stuff. No, my kind of mind, fixing elevators, be the perfect job. And then how do you get the video game addicts off the games? Auto mechanics. And they're going to find out that motors are more interesting than video games. And I just read a big article, a big review article on autism and video game addiction. It's a problem. No, and it's a true addiction. But you wean them off slowly. You got to replace it with something else. High-end skilled trades. We're going to need people to fix things. These elevators are a lot more fun than the video games. And this is the NASA control room, the one from the 60s, and they've rehabbed it. I was in there 7 or 8 years ago, and they were letting kids wreck it. In fact, I talked to a vet tech that was one of those kids, and they would play mission control in there. And then after one of the buttons got sold on eBay, they decided that maybe this is a historic monument, and they shouldn't let kids wreck the place. And it was very cool sitting in the gallery, watch everything light up, talking to the controllers, and I love the historical details. Giant ashtrays full of cigarette butts. This place was a total smoke-filled room. But you know what? Johnson Space Center, this year, 5 flights of stairs to get there, the elevator was broken. Yeah, that's now. Now, this is the kind of kid that I'd want my factory maintaining equipment. This is at a program called TACT that teaches trades to autistic kids. This is for my kind of thinker. And you can look at a box of parts and see flowers in it. That's the kind of creativity. And I was at the DeKalb High School today, and I really liked the welding class where they had them take bolts and parts and make action figures doing things out of them. That's sparking creativity. I went to another program somewhere away from here. I wasn't very pleased with it. Everybody was making the same barbecue grill. No. We need the people that can do this sort of thing because they're the ones that will invent equipment in factories. Now, another kind of autistic mind, because I want to emphasize autism comes in 3 flavors. Visual thinker like me, where skilled trades is a super good place to go. Then these are your mathematicians. Your mathematicians kids. And I just found out about this new major you have, Metatronics or something like that. Meta, that sounds like Facebook there, where you're taking physics, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and computer science all mixed together. That's like super, super cool. That's for the math kids. These are the mathematicians. I'm not a mathematician. I can't do algebra. I'm worried about my kind of mind's going to get screened out. But if you want those computers in that data center not to fry, you are going to need my kind of mind. And then what we need to do with the math kids is let's design a data center that doesn't require so much electricity. Let's make it half the size with circuits that do all of the same things with half the power. That's the kind of stuff. I want to take an elementary kid out there and show them those data centers. Now look at the amount of electric power this eats. This is disgusting. Your job is to design electronic circuits to use half the power. That's the kind of stuff I want little autistic math kids getting obsessed with. Music and math go together, and art and mechanics go together. And we're not working on developing our math kids. I'm hearing too many stories of brilliant little math kids that should be taking higher math. Maybe the elementary school kid needs high school math. Then teach them high school math. And Katherine Johnson, the famous mathematician, her math education was done right. She was moved ahead in math. We need our math kids. I read Science and Nature, and I see material science, better batteries, better circuits for the data center, Chinese authors. They're developing their math kids, and your best math kids are going to be autistic. Yes, special ed owns the shops in my generation. Special ed did a big scientific math stuff, too. They have to work together. Math people do the computers. I make sure they don't fry. You need to have both. Then you have your verbal autistic. This tends to be your history lover. They love facts, all kinds of things like that. And your autistic history lover can be very good at specialized retail because they'll know every feature of every car on the lot and help a person find the right car, not the most expensive car, the right printer, the right business insurance, the right fancy banking products that I don't understand. These are examples of jobs that have really worked. And there's research that shows about the different kinds of thinking. Mathematics and visual thought do not require language, period. That is the latest research published in the journal Nature. But they're different kinds of minds. And you're not going to make me an algebra specialist. California, I don't think I'll be able to graduate from high school. Well, if California like to not have the lights go off, they're going to need my kind of mind. Things are really messed up there. You get a 45-mile-an-hour wind, and you got to shut down the power because the wires may fall off the big towers and burn up everything because you never maintained the stuff. Now, here's the older research that's in my visual thinking book that shows that the visual thinker like me and the mathematical pattern thinker are different kinds of thinking. And I think one of the reasons why some people are pushing algebra so hard, they think you need algebra for thinking. That's not how I think. A visual thinker sees a solution to a problem. A visual thinker might also just see risk. Let's look at how visual memories are stored. Okay, one study says they're stored in the visual cortex. Another study says they can't access them without the frontal cortex. So what's right? I like this old-fashioned analogy. This library could not stand to throw out their card catalog. It was in the back room. So they use an old-fashioned analogy, and my mind works in analogies. The card catalog is the frontal cortex. The library is the books. The modern analogy is the search engine is the catalog. The library is that big, gigantic data centers that are out there. That's the library. But you have to have a way of finding the stuff in the library. Yeah, you need both parts of the brain. And different people are mixtures of the different kinds of thinking. Now, it turns out I got a big, huge, gigantic visual thinking circuit in my head. There are differences. There's a lot of kids that are middle of the road, but when you get the extreme visual thinker or the extreme mathematician, they really are different kinds of minds. But we need both kinds of minds working in a complementary manner. I can't emphasize that enough. So let's look at how art students, science students, and literature students go about designing a planet. Teams of students design a new planet. So the art students, how about a crystal planet, palm tree and penguin planet, stuff like that. The science students, they draw a boring circle, tell you about the gravity and the atmosphere, very little pictures. and the word students just made splotches. But you know what's bad about the word students? No planning. Word students have big ideas, but how do we implement them? What do we do to make a classroom more inclusive? One of the things we've got to do is get rid of the LED lights that flicker. That's going to be a problem for 10 to 20% special ed population. Also, migraine people and veterans with head injuries. These are people that will have problems with this. And you know how you find those LEDs that flicker? Whip out this thing right here and put it in slow motion video. You'll find them. Another really important accommodation is sequential information that's presented verbally needs to also be presented in a pilot's checklist format. I have no working memory. I need to write down, let's say I work at Walmart, I need to write down the steps to log off the cash register. I need to write that down, like a pilot's checklist. There's certain accommodations that come up over and over and over again. Yeah, but when I'm doing a talk, I can't have all this rapid motion around. Really sorry about that. Thank you for standing back there. But you see what a simple accommodation that was for her to just move back. That's all that we had to do, and that fixed the problem. And I always want to look at what are the simple things that we can do. Different approaches to problem solving. Object visualizers see risk. In my book about visual thinking, I wrote about the Fukushima nuclear power plant disaster. It's not a very good idea when you live next to the sea to put your super important electric emergency cooling pump in a non-waterproof basement. That's what they did. Watertight doors would have saved it. The mathematicians didn't see it. The mathematicians did a great job of making it earthquake-proof. But they didn't see they had to make it waterproof. You see, this is where you need the different kinds of thinkers. And verbal thinkers just discuss it. Well, it's just awful that it burned up. Yeah, it's totally awful. Watertight doors would have prevented it. But they could have prevented the disastrous breach of containment, burning through the base slab like really bad. They never called for help. That's social. How could you do that? There's no way I would sit and watch a nuclear reactor burn up. I'd have picking that phone up so fast, I'd be calling up General Electric, help, 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 calling up the military. We got to get big hoses and flood the core, like right now. I know people that could have done that. Any piece of equipment they would have needed, all they had to do up, their landline still worked in the control room. Pick up that phone. They didn't do it. Verbal thinkers tend to overgeneralize, leave out a lot of detail. The autistic mind, both the mathematician and the visual thinker, maybe too many details. You see, but I'm a bottom-up thinker. Now, the more information you put as little phone pictures in my mind, the better I can think. You've got to get these kids out doing lots of things, exposed to lots of different things, and see what they might be good at. I couldn't believe the 3D printer that Facebook bought for you. Really, really phenomenal. Don't usually see that in a school. Now let's go back and look at the early inventors. They were all mechanical devices in the beginning. They were all object visualizers. The Wright brothers making an airplane, they were bicycle mechanics. Now, I call these people the clever engineers. There's two parts of engineering. There's the industrial process equipment. No engineering degree required. Don't touch the structural of the building. That's what I did. None of these people have degrees. They can't do higher math. You see, there's the mathematical part of engineering, and then there is the visual side of engineering. There's two parts of it. And I'm very concerned about losing those visual thinkers. We're going to need them. You want the power to stay on? You want the water to work? Stuff like that? Yeah, you're going to need us non-mathematicians. Also, our non-mathematicians be very good at policy. I've been following the whole debacle with sustainable aviation fuel. United Airlines spent a lot of money on this. And they had all these hilarious videos with a Sesame Street garbage monster in a garbage can as the head of sustainable fuel development. You have one problem. You couldn't grow enough corn to feed those airplanes. And then Virgin Atlantic, that crazy guy pulled his pigs can fly stunt. And they had a plane running, a big, huge plane going from London to New York on 85% pig fat and 15% corn. You couldn't get enough pig fat. This is the problem. And so all of a sudden, United's videos disappeared, except the ones that they glued to the jet bridges so tight they can't get them off without wrecking the walls. Those are still there. But that was a big debacle. And a lot of that stuff went out of business. You can't get enough of the feedstock. You couldn't get enough garbage. Now, there's stuff on a local level where the sustainable fuel will work. But there's other stuff right now. Where do you get the organic material? You can't. Yeah, that was an expensive mess. Looked sustainable, but there was no way they could do it other than some demo flights. Yeah, you could do that. It's amazing what you can fly airplanes on. All kinds of organic stuff. The chemists can do amazing things. But maybe the visual thinker who's been on all the farmland is going to go, you can't grow enough corn to do that. There's no way. Okay, half of all big 3D printers come from Europe. Now, this is the inside of the state-of-the-art electronic chip-making machine that makes the tiniest little chips. It's based on our mathematics, but it comes from Holland. Why are the Dutch building this? Because they didn't take out shop classes. Look at all the mechanical gadgets on this thing for my kind of mind. You see, you need to have both. Yes, and it'll be obsolete in 2 years. And I've been reading papers with Chinese authors about new kinds of circuits. Yes, they're developing their math kids. It's going to take the non-mathematician to figure out that we better do a better job of developing math kids, and that needs to start in elementary school. You move them ahead. And it has mirrors made by the Zeiss microscope company from Germany. Now let's go into food processing. That's the thing I understand. We used to make all this equipment. Right now, if you want to build a poultry processing plant or a pork processing plant, you're going to be buying all the stuff from Holland. Again, that goes back to those shop classes in 9th grade, and you can go tech or university. We stick our nose up at tech. People don't realize it is a different kind of intelligence. And I'm not talking about concrete flat work. That's just work. Laying these floors, that's just work. I'm talking about the real high-end stuff, where you actually invent equipment. Because I've seen mathematical engineers go, well, they just build equipment. No, they invent equipment. I spent 25 years working with them. In my generation, special ed owned the big shops. And the problem we got now is the little shops are not forming to turn into the big shops. The parachute cloth for the Mars rover, woven on high-tech European looms. And that's me standing in the middle of Steve Jobs' theater screaming, we don't make it anymore. Structural glass walls from Italy and Germany. This should have been made by the Corning Glass Works. And then look what Boeing did. They sold their soul to private equity 20 years ago. I don't like sitting in the airport and learning about loose rudder bolts, then finding out that one of the airlines had to pull 5 or 6 planes out of services because the rudder bearings were installed backwards, and when the pilot pushed on the rudder pedals, they didn't work. Thank goodness it was stuck in neutral. Thank goodness. You could still steer without the rudder. But it was, that's really, really bad. Yeah. Engineers used to run Boeing. Yeah. And I hope they can get it back. They can't seem to build a Starliner spaceship with thrusters that work either. They probably got dirt into the lines and it clogged up the little thrusters. Yeah, you need those people in the shop to do it right. We've paid the price for taking out hands-on classes out of the schools. I'm glad to see that you've got them here. I'm very pleased with what I saw the day at the DeKalb High School. Great music program there. I tried musical instruments. I couldn't play them. Art was my thing. I was doing tools, all kinds of tools growing up. Woodworking in 5th grade. Theater's really good. All of these things. It's important to keep those things because they help develop the different kinds of minds. This is TACT in Colorado. They teach in autistic citizens trades. They do car mechanics, welding, carpentry work. And what they do in these classes is they have the mechanic there, but they also have a life coach. So at the same time, they're learning life skills. And then they have contracts with car dealerships to place the mechanics. It's sort of like a project search for mechanical stuff. And it's working. 70% retention rate. It is working. This is the kind of stuff I really like. And I'm just horrified that too many 16-year-olds who are fully verbal have never gone shopping. They don't have a bank account. They've never done laundry. They're just not learning any life skills. That's completely terrible. This is where the autism label is holding them back. And the problem we've got with the autism label is you're going from Einstein at one end of it, then you have a non-speaking individual. Some of those can learn to type independently, maybe even go to college, and there's others with much more severe stuff wrong with them. You've got this huge spectrum, and people get too stuck up on the labels. Having an interesting career has made life interesting for me. My grandfather was the co-inventor of the autopilot for airplanes, MIT-trained engineer, and he worked with an autistic guy. And everybody in aviation thought they were nuts, that this idea, flux valve, stupidest thing they ever saw. Everybody in aviation was trying to connect the plane's controls directly to the magnetic compass. What do you think the plane did? If you've ever worked with a magnetic compass, this is what the plane did. That's not going to work. So they were a garage startup. They had a lab and a workshop and a loft over where they fixed trains. And they tinkered and they tinkered and they tinkered, and they got it to work. It got stolen. The stolen version was in every warplane during World War II. They were terrible business people. That's where they need a lawyer. You're going to need the verbal mind. The educational system screening out my kind of mind. You need us. You need us to say, all right, we can't get enough organic matter for sustainable aviation fuel. Now look at another thing that's been going on that just got shut down, definitely wasn't very sustainable, was we were going to get leftovers, scraps from sawmills to pelletize and ship over to the UK to burn in the power plant. But you can't get enough leftovers. So they started cutting trees down in the southeast to pelletize. This went on for 5 years. This actually happened. Put it on a boat to ship over to the UK as carbon neutral fuel. How ridiculous. Actually did this. Like, you've got to be kidding. This is where you need a visual thinker to go, no, we're not going to do that. But I've got other things. I'm very concerned, being in the cattle industry, that cattle are getting bashed unfairly. What do you do with the 20% of the land can only be grazed? You put animals on it that can graze it, to grow food on it. I wrote a paper on grazing cattle, sheep, and goats, important part of a sustainable agricultural future. And that can be done truly sustainably, where you can actually rejuvenate the land if you do the rotational grazing correctly, especially out in the arid West. We've got land where you can't crop it. It's impossible. It's too arid. Now, this plane right here is owned by somebody who can't do algebra, who took a single welding class in high school, probably 45 years ago, built a tiny cattle handling facility for our experiment station. He's now building big beef plants. And he started out as a little shop, gradually did more and more stuff, turned into a big shop. Yeah, they're not getting replaced. And this is a hydraulic power unit that he built to run a beef plant. If you know anything about hydraulics, this is like so cool. There's a reason for that slackened hoses, so they don't vibrate and break. Now this is under construction center track restrainer system. This is a piece of equipment I worked on developing for big meat plants. All the big meat plants have this. If you want to see how it works, you can look up Beef Plant Video Tour with Temple Grandin, and you can see how it works. The person who built the first one had a big shop. He was definitely autistic. 20 patents, and the industry's still using this stuff. This is where you need the skills. And it's a lot of fun to play with the big Legos. And we got too many kids today growing up that have never used a tool. I had a student in my class that didn't know that, okay, we got a 30-inch wide cattle chute, and that 2'6" and 30 inches is the same thing. She didn't know that. I've had students that have never measured anything. I've talked to shop teachers where they have to spend 2 or 3 weeks just teaching measurement to students. Didn't used to have to do that. Okay, let's look at who builds a big food processing plant. My kind of mind will lay out the whole factory. That's done by the object visualizers. 1 semester class in CAD drafting. Also, my kind of mind builds all the mechanical things, invents all the mechanical stuff in factories. Now, where you need the mathematician, you're trained, university-trained engineer, boilers, refrigeration, we don't touch that stuff. We don't understand refrigeration. This is where you need the mathematical mind. You need to have both kinds of thinkers working on these things. Now, in writing the visual thinking book, I did the kind of disorganized, rough drafts. And Betsy Lerner, my verbal co-author, she straightened it all out. That's different kinds of minds working in a complementary manner. Architects make the building look nice. Engineers make it safe. You need to have both. 20% of the people I worked with during the 25 years where I worked in construction for every major meat company, the people were either autistic, dyslexic, or ADHD, owning big shops. I've been out to the tech companies, half of those programmers are on the spectrum. And then you watch some of the ones testifying in Congress. That's a real autistic show. I've seen that. Look up the old Bill Gates antitrust depositions when he gets asked about killing Netscape and he starts rocking when they confront him with an email that he'd forgotten he'd written, and he's going like this. If we didn't have the autistic brains, we wouldn't even have technology. There's great art we wouldn't have. There's a lot of things we wouldn't have. But these people owned big shops, multiple patents, and they couldn't do higher math. But boy, could they design mechanical stuff. Grandparents come up to me all the time with good jobs, and they find out they're autistic when the kids get diagnosed. But they learned working skills. They had paper routes when they were 11. They had developed kind of entrepreneurial skills. I read an interesting book about the silver and gold industry in Montana. And a silver miner, a guy who ran a silver mine, was a stutterer. But he was selling newspapers when he was a little kid. So he learned how to talk to people. That's why he was running a silver mine. And a lot of these people had very successful careers. And where the diagnosis helped was with relationships, I think it's holding them back on the career front. What would happen to some of our top innovators of the past if they were in today's educational system? Where would Michelangelo be? Grubby little 12-year-old who dropped out of school. But he'd grown up with stone cutting tools, and he was going around all these churches seeing great art. Exposure. You got to have exposure, then mentoring. Then he was apprenticed into a studio. So you start out with the exposure, then mentoring. I had a very good science teacher who mentored me. Steve Jobs, bullied in school, probably on the spectrum. Einstein, no speech till age 3. He'd land on the spectrum today. Thomas Edison, high school dropout. He was selling newspapers at a young age. He also did chemistry experiments in the baggage car of the train and managed to burn up a baggage car. That did not go over so well. But he learned how to work. And he had a mentor that taught him how to use the telegraph. Yeah, that was his background. And here's another very famous autistic person. If you've seen the rocket landing on the gantry, they call it chopsticks. And this thing comes down, slows down, and catches just like a meatball on chopsticks. That's associative visual thinking. And, I mean, that is engineering history books. I mean, I saw that. I just can't believe how that worked. A Nobel Prize winner was 50% more likely to have an arts and crafts hobby compared to other scientists. Yeah, that's the other reason for keeping all these things in the schools. All right, let's look at tips for working with minds that are different. Multitasking. You see, one of the problems I had with the motion from the sign language interpreter was that my mind, I've got slow processing speed, so it was too distracting. So the kind of jobs you probably want to avoid is a chaotic takeout window at lunchtime, a store that's total rapid multitasking chaos during the holidays. Probably avoid those jobs. The checklists. You know, there's two kinds of checklists. You have a job that you do every day, like close out a cash register. You'd make a checklist, and after a while, probably you'd get rid of it. But then I might have different tasks to do each day. Let's say shelving groceries. Well, I'm going to do this aisle and that aisle. I said, just let me write it down. Let me just write down what tasks you want to have me do today. And another place where jobs get lost is they'll say, oh, we're going to let this person go because they don't get along with colleagues or they're rude to customers. That's too vague. You've got to tell them what exactly did they do wrong. And when I had my very first job, I criticized some welding, and I said it looked like pigeon doo-doo. And the plant engineer pulled me into his office, explained quietly in private I'd have to apologize. He told me exactly what I should do. You see, it wasn't vague. Vague feedback doesn't work. And there's some stuff where you're going to have to comply. Hygiene's one of them. Clean it up. You just have to comply on that. Vagueness doesn't work. What's the ultimate goal of education? Where's a student 10 years after high school? I was doing some of my first big design jobs. I think we need to be looking more and more. Where is a student 10 years after they graduate from high school? What are they doing? There's a lot of places I don't want them. Crime, drugs, prison, stuff like that. I don't want them there. But I was doing my first big jobs, and everybody thought I was stupid and I wasn't going to amount to anything. And I did this drawing in 1978, and I looked at it and I go, I guess I'm not stupid. But what I learned was to sell my work rather than myself, and I worked freelance. That helped avoid a lot of problems because I'd go in, design the job, get it going, and leave. I was a startup person. And that's the drawing I sent to the Cargill Corporation back in the late 80s that sold them on having me design the front end of every Cargill beef plant in North America. I think that's doing pretty good for somebody you thought was stupid and somebody who can't do higher math. Yeah, this is the clever engineering department. And he got sent this picture, and you might wonder why curved, because as they come around the bend, they think they're going back to where they come from. Cattle have a natural tendency to do that. And I loved that the HBO movie duplicated my projects. They also showed exactly how I think visually. That's shown very, very accurately. And they recreated my projects. That's another thing that I really liked. Then I had a nice brochure, and that was one of the pictures that I sent to them. It was sort of a 30-second wow. Don't put too much junk in the portfolio. 30-second wow is what you want. Exercise. I do 120 old lady push-ups every night. Then I do 100 laps laying on the floor swimming. And when I first started doing this, I couldn't even get my legs off the ground. And then right now I get quite a bit of back pain. But even though I got some pain, I said, when I'm walking the airport, okay, don't do old lady walking. You're going to walk fast down that jet bridge. You know, don't walk like an old lady. I don't need to go first. I can go down there myself. But exercise. A lot of kids are not getting exercise, and there's a research now that totally supports the need for exercise. Let's look at work experience. Let's look at 11-year-olds, church volunteer jobs. They need to learn how to do a task on a schedule where family's not the boss. Somebody outside the family's the boss. You walk Mr. Jones's dog. One 12-year-old became the church's coffee lady. She was very proud of that. That is the kind of stuff we need to be doing. Instant illegal, real jobs. Mother got me a sewing job when I was 13 years old, just in a home of a seamstress. She did dressmaking. I took apart dresses, I hand-hemmed them. And then I was cleaning horse stalls. Got kicked out of 9th grade. I got sent to special school. They put me to work running the horse barn. I learned working skills. Mother was concerned at the time about the lack of academics. I made that up. You know, I was off in things like English and history. And then I had the chance to go visit my aunt's ranch. And I was afraid to go. And Mother gave me a choice. 1 week or all summer. Not going wasn't a choice. You give some choice. I had a little sign painting business. And I had to make signs that customers actually would want. That's another important skill to learn. When I was in college, I did career-relevant internships, like a research lab. Got to get out and doing these things. Too many of these kids, we don't get them out doing enough stuff. We get them out doing things and choices. When I was a little kid, I'm going to call it high expectations, but having some accommodations. And when I was 5 years old, I remember going on this ferry boat. And we had to go on the ferry boat every summer to go on vacation. And when it went into the harbor, it blew its horn and it hurt my ears, and I screamed and I flung myself on the deck. Yeah, we're going to go on this ferry. You can ride in the cabin below. That was the accommodation. Real simple accommodation. Yes, but we are going on the ferry. But on the other hand, we make an accommodation. Back doors into jobs. One of the really important scenes in the HBO movie is a scene where I go up to the editor of the Farmer Ranchman magazine and I get his card. That actually happened. And I had the guts to go up and ask for the card. And then I produced a good article. That's back door. They're everywhere. And people don't see them. Half of all good jobs are back door. This is where we get too stuck on the label. This is stuff that helped me. This is 50s upbringing. Kids in my neighborhood, when they were 7 and 8 years old, when the parents had parties, you put your good clothes on, little party hostess. You had to talk to the guests. We were not allowed to call them by their first names, even though we knew them. It was good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Culver, Mr. and Mrs. Wood. Well, we knew their names, Holty and Phoebe. We weren't allowed to use them. But that taught social skills and greeting people, selling candy for charity, shopping by myself. I was doing that at age 8, and I got a little allowance, 50 cents by a lot in the 50s. I could get 10 candy bars, 5 Superman comics. But if I wanted a 69-cent airplane, I had to save for 2 weeks. That taught saving. Then you start learning what money's worth. Friends who shared interests. I got bullied a lot in high school, and my only friends were horseback riding and model rockets. For today, it might be robotics, it might be theater. When I was in college, I got some bullying, and then I went in a school talent show. That opened up a lot of doors. Friends through shared interests. That's why we got to get the kids out trying and doing lots of stuff. Find out what they like, find out what they don't like. And when I was in high school, I fixed up this ugly shed, but I did it in a way that they would like. And that's me up there on a sign at the Arizona State Fair. I was in my 20s, and I went up to an old sign painter, and I showed him my portfolio, and they put me to work painting a sign for this goofy exhibit. It was a wax dummy in a freezer chest full of ice. It was absolutely, totally stupid. But that's that entrepreneur spirit. That's that entrepreneur spirit. And that's my sign painting truck. If I had not learned to drive, that would have really, really hindered my career. And fortunately, I was out on my aunt's ranch, and the mailbox was 3 miles away on a dirt road. Lots and lots of practice in a totally safe place. We did 6 weeks of mailbox trips before I did any traffic. And after I got my license, I went a whole year before doing freeway. We work into it slowly, starting out in really safe places. You got plenty of safe places, outside of town here, or big parking lots. When Walmart's closed, things like that, you can go and practice driving. Yeah, but a lot more practice in an absolutely safe place. Slow transition from school to work. We already talked about jobs on a schedule outside the home, shopping. We tend to over-accommodate. There's certain things we have to accommodate. The multitasking, the pilot's checklist, those things are really important. But they need to learn how to keep a real job before they graduate from high school. Mentors are important. This is Jim the contractor. He seeked me out to design projects for him. Yeah, there were some good people in the industry. Now let's look at some of my mentors. My mother taught me to read at age 8. I went into a very, very good early intervention program. Within the last year, I was out in a rural town of Illinois. I think we'll leave out where it was. But a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old that's not talking was put on a 2-year wait list. That is not acceptable. You are missing a developmental window there. I was in early intervention by 2.5, and I looked really severe. And the only good thing about me was I had no epilepsy. But everything else looked just terrible. You got to work on these little ones young. Great elementary school teachers. I had a great science teacher who gave me interesting projects, got me motivated to study. Jim the contractor. There also were some good people at the Swift plant to help me, the plant superintendent, and Harley the engineer, who told me what to do after the pigeon doo-doo thing. Let's look at sensory issues. Okay, one of the ways to help a kid tolerate loud noises is let the kid control the thing that makes the noise. Vacuum cleaners, hair dryers, battery-operated leaf throwers, electric drills. Go down the shop and just drill holes in all kinds of stuff. When they turn on the noise, it's often better tolerated. I've seen vacuum cleaners go to favorite playthings. Now, the problem is if you wear headphones all the time, it's going to make it worse. Have them with you all the time. And then when there's something really bad goes on, like the fire alarm, you can put them on. Have them with you. And then I need to have soft clothing. Like these pants right now come from Walmart, and I have to wash them 3 times before they're good enough for plane rides. But I've seen vet tech jobs lost because of a stiff scrub uniform. Wash the scrub uniform. There's tons of different scrub uniforms. You can find ones that don't itch. Let's not lose a job over that. You have a lot of choices there. Visual processing problems. I talked about the problems with the lights that flicker. That's probably the number one thing that might be in a classroom. These are the kids that may despise escalators because they can't tell how to get on and off of them. There are some individuals where the visual images break up. In your brain, you have circuits for color, shape, motion, and texture. And those circuits are not working together right. Some individuals see print jiggling on the page. Now, there's dyslexic fonts that sometimes work. You can just type dyslexic fonts. That's different types of type. You can find those. Some people really like those. Also, try printing the homework on different pastel papers. Light blue, light tan, light lavender, light yellow. Try all these different pale pastel colors until you find the color of paper that works. And when it works, it works. And there's a book on the bookstand called The Girl Who Loves Cows. Hopefully we still have some. It's printed on pastel paper. I've had people pick that book up and go, I can read. Right there, instantly. We already talked about problems in the classroom with the LED lights that flicker. So what do I do if I'm stuck with ceiling lights and no windows? Wear a hat, go find an LED that does not flicker and put it on the desk. Put it in the workstation to blot out the other light. These are things that we can do. And the screens that never flicker are laptops and tablets. Those do not flicker. Some of your flat panels flicker depending upon how the computer's set. These are simple things that we can do. I like to get a lot of these accommodations down to simple stuff we can do when there's no excuse for not doing it. Some individuals, extreme effort is required to screen out background noise. This is when they talk about masking, and it's just so hard. Noisy restaurant, I can't hear. I'm at a noisy party. I tend to talk to one or two people. When it's like a fast chit-chat conversation, I can't follow it. It all gets down to processor speed. Some individuals need sensory breaks. Now, this is a treatment that's very simple to do. Environmental enrichment is an effective treatment for autism. It's a sensory treatment. That's the title of the paper. You type that into Google, you'll find the paper. You stimulate two senses at the same time, like maybe touch and smell. So you might hold a cold water glass and smell some peppermint. You're always going across the modalities. Uses simple household things. You keep changing the pair of stimuli that you're using. You constantly keep changing them. Now, these are books of non-speaking individuals who type completely independently. And if you're working with older kids and adults who don't speak, you need to read these books. And my two favorites are How Can I Talk If My Lips Don't Move? And Fall Down 7 Times, Get Up 8 by Noki. That's the sequel to The Reason I Jump. It's a better book. He's older and he's got more insight. Now, here's some tips for working with nonverbals. Use a tablet because the print has to appear next to the keyboard. If you use this laptop, I look here and then the print appears up here. You've got to look. They can't gaze shift. That's why you use a tablet. Or if you use a desktop, you'll have to put the keyboard on a box to get it up close to the monitor, and then you've got to make sure it's a monitor that doesn't flicker. So the simplest thing to do is a tablet. That's the simplest thing that you can get really easily. Well, but there's some non-speaking that have gone to college. Attention shifting slowness, slow processor speed, rapid conversation, real fast chit-chats, I can't follow it, rapid multitasking, rapid response to a question, remembering long strings of verbal information. I have problems with interrupting conversations, and I know it's rude, but I just can't get the timing right. Slow processor speed. Now, this affects a lot of social stuff, but it doesn't do anything in engineering. That's all done off long-term memory. Attention shifting slowness. This is the problem I had when she was right there moving, is I would grab my attention, and it takes me longer to shift back. See, that's a processing speed issue. So the simple accommodation is to have her a little further back, so you still have your sign language interpreter, but she's not bothering me. Okay, that's a very simple accommodation. She just had to step back. And if she was down there, no, I can't handle that. You know, in the back of the auditorium, if they're doing it, that's fine. Because then I can just concentrate on the people in the front. So I want to figure out simple things that we can do. Now, this is an old slide, but it really shows attention-shifting slowness. This was done when the very first eye tracking software came out, old black and white movie. And look at how much the normal one looks back and forth. And the autistic didn't look back and forth even twice. And they're trying to lip read. That's attention-shifting slowness. When you're working with your little kids, slow down when you talk. Encourage them to use their words. Give that kid time to respond. I cannot emphasize that enough. And don't get in their face. We need to get away from all this forced eye contact stuff. And what was the main things done in my 3-year-old program? There was no forced eye contact, speech, turn-taking at games. We've got to teach kids how to wait and take turns. And then skills, things like getting dressed, brushing your teeth, using utensils, just skills. Those were the emphasis in my little kids program. And I liked going to therapy. If the kid hates therapy, something's wrong. Another thing is use teachable moments. So if the child puts his finger in the mashed potatoes and then licks it, you tell them what to do. People think that's gross when you do that. Use the fork. You give the instruction instead of screaming no. I call that teachable moment. And we've got to be teaching the turn taking, because that teaches the kid to inhibit a response. And I found that some of these teachers are really good at engaging these little kids, taking turns spinning whatever jar lid or whatever they're spinning. Guess it won't be pennies anymore. They're not going to be making them anymore. But maybe a jar lid being spun. Now, it turns out, yeah, I'm missing some memory stuff there. Now, another issue in autism is all the anxiety. And I found out that my fear center was 3 times larger than normal. So when I got into puberty and the hormones hit, I just had horrible, horrible, horrible fear. No, it was innate. It was terrible. And as I went through my 20s, it got worse and worse and worse. And I was afraid of airplanes after being in a very scary emergency landing. I was afraid of public speaking. This plane was the worst one I was afraid of. When that thing put the gear down, I was sure the plane was falling apart. Well, if you learn something about it, you want to hear the sound of putting the gear down. I don't want them to land without wheels. So you take something that's scary and you start making it interesting. And I got to fly in the cockpit of one of these with a load of Holstein cows going down to Puerto Rico. She still flew after hundreds of cattle had peed and crapped all over it. And cow pee was dripping out the bottom of this plane. This is Miami Cargo Airport, early 70s. Oh, it was out of control. Circus didn't begin to describe some of the stuff they did there. And when I got in my early 30s, I started going on antidepressants because I had uncontrollable colitis. My health was totally falling apart. I'm taking a very low dose. You have to use a very low dose because too high a dose, you get agitation and insomnia. That's described in detail in Thinking in Pictures. Even though that book's old, the drugs haven't changed. But I'm one of the ones where I don't even know if I'd be alive today. I'm 77 now, if I had not gone on that low dose of antidepressant. But way too many drugs are given out to little kids. Way too many drugs. It's disgusting. You know, some of the basic things, you carefully try one thing at a time and see what works. You started a new school and started a drug at the same time. You don't know what worked. Okay, my squeezing machine helped me. I was one of the kids that was a pressure seeker, where I really liked pressure. It helped calm me down. Now, I built that myself. I got the idea from a cattle squeeze chute. Now, one of the things is I could control the squeeze machine, and that helped me to desensitize being touched by people. Yeah, that element of control is really important. Now, there's other simpler ways that you can do pressure that the OTs do, and you got to show kids interesting stuff to get them interested. And I got fascinated by an optical illusion room, and my science teacher said to me, I want you to figure out how to make it yourself. Yeah, they wanted me to figure it out. Yeah, and I eventually did, and that's shown in the movie. This is Penrose tiling. This was used by Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking, the famous mathematician. And note Stephen Hawking said right before he died, he said, concentrate on those things your disability doesn't prevent you from doing well. He could do math in his head super well. And we need to get exposing kids to journals like Science and Nature. I just read an article on material science. All the authors were Chinese. But that article had the most amazing geometrical, beautiful patterns. And you can see these beautiful geometrical patterns in things in our bodies, things for making better batteries, chemistry in beautiful patterns. That's the kind of stuff you want to put that in front of a math kid. And they're going to want to find out where those patterns come from. Subscribe to these magazines. There's Science, American Association for the Advancement of Science, is the American version. Nature is the sister publication from the UK. I'd recommend putting both of them in the high school library. And there's certain articles like, oh, you just have to leaf through it. Look at that beautiful mathematical pattern there on that cover. You can find that in articles there. It's stuff like battery materials. But even stuff in our bodies has these mathematical patterns. Fractals are really cool. Lots of free stuff online. Plants have math in it. And these are some great free computer programming, Khan Academy, National Geographic Citizen Science. These are just cool things that we can get kids involved in. All kinds of great free stuff.
Did you always know that you wanted to be doing animal science, or was there at some point in your life, like, you wanted to do something else and then you realized animal science?
Well, what happened with animal science is my mother got remarried when I was 13, and that brought the ranch into the family. And I went out to the ranch when I was 15. That started the interest in cattle. I was from back east. Now, it was luck that that happened, But that's an example of getting exposed to things. If I wasn't exposed to cattle, I wouldn't have gotten interested in livestock. I also got very interested in optical illusions, and I majored in psychology because I had to dodge the math classes. I had to drop a physics class. I had to drop a biomedical engineering class, but let me tell you, they need us. How many of you heard about the disastrous metal-on-metal artificial hip that put gunk into people's bodies? That's a mistake I wouldn't have made. I would have seen it in the sheep experiments, and I go, this ain't going to work. Yeah, that's where you need people like me. That was a disastrous mess, the metal-on-metal hip. So you need us non-mathematicians and stuff like that, too. Also, you need us in the methods of experiments. Millions of dollars worth of cancer research wrecked because one lab used a magnetic mixer, and the other lab used this little Ferris wheel thing that was really gentle. And it changed the results of cancer studies. The mixing device that they used, little $200 devices, changed. It matters. Methods matter. Boy, I can tell you, reviewing journal articles, I go over the methods. Okay, so you do a meat quality experiment in chickens and you don't tell me what you fed them. That can change the results. They'll do all this fancy math, but they don't tell me what they fed the chickens. And that can change the results. Yeah, I go over the methods section. That's what I do. Okay, right there.
My son and I both have aphantasia. He's been diagnosed autistic. We're both ADHD. I'm not sure where we fit into that scheme because we don't think in words. We don't think in pictures. We can't see pictures.
But a lot of people that are you good at math? I bet you are.
No, actually.
You're not.
But
Okay.
I'm good in organizing. I'm good. I make things. I make things so I can show not just to other people but myself what's in my head because I can't express it another way. Whether it's words or clothes or whatever, I'm making things so that I can show other people the concepts and the abstracts and the ideas and the experience.
Yeah, you see, because now do you ever dream in pictures?
I dream very vividly, but I can't see it when I'm awake.
Okay, but that's the common pattern. I've got a section in my book on aphantasia. Now, there's quite a few people with aphantasia that are good at math.
My kid is.
Because that's a pattern thinking. Math is pattern thinking.
Yeah.
My mind is like little phone pictures. So the more things I get out and I see, stuff that interests me, I go, click, I'm going to take a picture of that. Well, remember this lectern? Probably not, because it's a pretty ordinary lectern. And that's low on my interest.
I will look at that. Thank you very much.
Okay, hopefully that helps you.
I was just wondering, so first, I'm a speech therapist in the district, and so my first question to you is, what is your view and recommendation for use of AAC, alternative
communication?
Exactly.
It's important to give kids a way to communicate. I can remember the frustration of not being able to talk, and I would just fling myself down and scream. You got to give them a way to communicate, even if it's just a picture board. Something very simple like that. Right. Maybe some sign language, but some way to communicate, I think, is really important. But then if the kid's starting to learn language, I want to encourage them to use the language, but give the kid time to respond. The other thing I want to mention while we're talking about non-speaking, there's a lot of non-speaking that turn out to have urinary tract infections, ear infections, and other really bad things. And the doctors are saying, well, their behavior is due to autism. No, their behavior was due to a painful tooth, to an advanced urinary tract infection. Let's say you have a nonverbal that's been good, now its behavior's deteriorated. Let's look for hidden painful medical. You can do a test. You can look in the ears. Acid reflux is another real big one. Recently, I found a case of scurvy. That's the old-fashioned vitamin C deficiency disease that we no longer study in home ec. This kid had such a limited diet, he wasn't getting enough vitamin C. And the doctor didn't diagnose it. He had weird swellings, and I said, well, let's see if he's getting enough vitamin C. And I added it up. He was not getting anywhere near enough vitamin C. They put him on C supplements. It cleared right up. It was scurvy. There's a tendency, and this is recent. This happened this year. This is real recent. And when I bring up this in meetings, just the last meeting I was at, a horrible ear infection with pus coming out of it. You didn't find that? No wonder they had, behavior problems. No, hidden painful medical. It's not just the autism.
So I guess the reason why I'm asking this is because there's so much misinformation surrounding us in today's society. And so what I often run into is people in general thinking that a communication device will hinder verbal speech. And then along with that, I'm one of a couple of bilingual speech therapists in the district. And so in my community, there is also like an extra layer preventing some people from accessing reputable sources. And
well, let's talk about they used to think, well, 2 languages is bad, let's just do one. Actually, it's fine to be bilingual, where maybe we do one language at school and another language at home. And we always encourage the child to use the words. That's the important thing. Okay, let's look at the outcome. Words, more skills, and better turn-taking. That's what I want out of little ones. I'm talking 3 to 4 and 5-year-olds. And we get on this wait list stuff. We got to get the grandmothers in the community to start doing it now. We can call it library play. We're not allowed to call it therapy, but it really is. It's library play. Or it's church play, something like that. Because you got to get working on these little ones. And what I have found is some teachers have the knack to engage these kids. I think it's an innate skill. Been around for a long time. I know that's not very scientific. And augmentative communication device can be something as simple as a picture board that you can just make. You know, because we got to do things that our low-income folks can do. And let's get a retired person to start working with this kid. The research is very clear. If you start intervention before 5, you have better prognosis than starting it after 5. I just found a new paper on that. There's a developmental window there. Waiting is the worst thing you can do. If you have a 2-year-old that's not talking, rule out deafness. Make sure they're not deaf. Make sure the mouth isn't messed up. Then you better start working on them. You may have to do it yourself. Mom cannot do it all herself. She's going to get too stressed out. And the research is very clear that the intervention works better if you have an outside teacher working with this kid really extensively. Mom can work with them too, but mom can't do it all herself. That's just not going to work. And I also like to look at things and give really simple instructions. And we can use even the simplest communication device. A picture board, anybody can make that. Let's just at least do that. Tablets are around. I'd like to get the internet connection cut off from them.
I'm a student at UW-Platteville, majoring in dairy science. I was wondering if you could elaborate on how you go about jumping into the minds of cattle and seeing things from their point of view. And
cattle are sensory-based. Mm-hmm. Pictures, sounds, smells. My book, Animals and Translations, out there. An animal lives in a sensory-based world. You have to get away from words. They don't have verbal language. Its memories will be pictures, sounds, smells, touch sensations. There's no words. They're very, very sensitive to the tone of voice. If you have an angry tone of voice, they pick up on that real, real quickly. It is a sensory-based world, not a word-based world. It's the single most important thing you can learn about an animal. And yes, they do have emotions. Fear, anger, separation distress, which is a different emotion than fear. Seek or exploration. Some animals are big explorers. Then, of course, you got the sex drive. You got mother-young nurturing, like licking the young, oxytocin system, and play. Okay.
You said when you were 13, you were very fearful. How did you cope with that fear?
Well, it was really hard, and it was definitely related to when the hormones hit. When the estrogen levels were the highest, I had the most fear. Lots of exercise helped. I didn't want to go to my aunt's ranch because I was afraid of getting panic attacks. It worsened as I went through my 20s. And I talk about this in my book, Thinking in Pictures. You kind of can fight fire with fire and go out and do really, really exciting things, or retreat to your room. I was not allowed to retreat to my room. And when I went to the special school, they didn't care if I studied, but I had to attend classes, attend chapel, attend meals. And when I got so nervous I didn't want to attend movie night, they said, you've got a choice. You run the movie projector or you sit in the audience. I ran the movie projector. So that's giving a choice. I could be on the top of the deck on the ferry or underneath. but we're going on the ferry. You see, this is the kind of sort of straightforward, high expectations with some very simple accommodations.
I'm a K-12 educator, and I often find myself frustrated by the newest and most predominant wave of education being standards-based education. And I was wondering if you had a take on standards-based education, as I'm often frustrated by the fact that I have to always follow rigid standards and never can
Well, I think
fully
that some of
adapt.
this stuff can get way too rigid. And I think the verbal thinkers have taken over. I'm sorry to bash you verbal thinkers, but that's where we get a lot of this stuff. I think the ultimate outcome of good education is where's a student 10 years after high school? Now, the things I have to have, 6th grade reading level, 6th grade arithmetic level, and 6th grade writing level. I can run a Fortune 500 company on that. I do have to get them up to that. I didn't read it in 3rd grade. Mother had me read out loud out of The Wizard of Oz, learning phonetically to sound out my words. And I very quickly went from no reading to 6th grade level reading on a standardized test where I had to read a little paragraph and then answer questions about it. Yeah, there's some testing like that we got to do. I should be able to take an article in the newspaper, cut all the pictures off. Let's say it's about a storm. Cut the pictures off, and you should be able to tell me where was the storm, what did it wreck, what did it do. That's basic reading. Yeah, we've got to try to get to that. And then you can do a lot of things. You see, I don't think abstractly. There's a lot of education theory that I think it's abstract BS, where I tend to be, what's that kid doing 10 years after high school? I hope he's not in prison, criminal, or addicted to drugs, or dead, or some other bad thing like that, that they've gotten it as a good career beyond an entry-level job, have a family, maybe, go out and do good stuff. All this algebra emphasis, because I worked with so many people, they couldn't do higher math. I'm one of them. So how to get a PhD? Tutored in every single math class I took. I escaped algebra as a freshman in '66 because they were into the statistics and probability rage at that time. And I had to get tutored. I had to get tutored in a statistics class, and I did something about it when I failed my first class. I was dodging math classes everywhere I could go. And I did very well in all my other classes. But I'm concerned about screening out the visual thinkers, and we're getting more stuff breaking, and that's where you're going to need our kind of minds. And then you look at a debacle like sustainable aviation fuel. I could have told you before you started you couldn't grow enough corn for that.
In 2012, I had a cerebral venous sinothrombosis, and my brain was kind of floating in blood for 8 days, and it cut off a lot of oxygen to my blood, and I was told I lost a certain percentage of my short-term memory, and I'm not going to get it back.
The first thing when you deprive oxygen, some of the memory stuff.
And so since then, I can only kind of remember things if I touch them.
Well, you have to do it. You have to do it. So then you touch things. So then you get a job where maybe you get a massage therapist. Okay, see, that's something that just instantly came into my mind. A job that's just touch.
Okay. I always wanted to work with animals.
You might be really good with animals.
Well, I was in vet tech for...
Okay, how did you do in vet tech?
I was halfway through my externship hours, but I wanted to go into feline, but the hospital I was doing my clinical hours at was all small animal, and it was just really bright and loud, and I just got very overwhelmed.
But there's other kinds of animal jobs you could work out on a ranch somewhere, and it's not bright and loud.
That's true.
Yeah, there's other things you could do with animals.
Women, especially when they're older, don't get, because I'm 45, don't get really diagnosed.
Well,
the
women, the symptoms aren't quite so obvious. And the thing is, autism is a true continuous trait. When does nerd get a label put on it? I mean, we're really, really being serious here. You see, a brain can be more social, or a brain can be more interested in what they do. This is why I think having an interesting career is important, because I am what I do. And you need to find stuff maybe stuff you can do with animals where it's not loud and bright, where you could, there's veterinarians and stuff that do home calls. That's something that would be calmer. you got to find something where you don't get some of the sensory problems.
I was diagnosed with autism kind of late in my life. Around my senior year of high school, I had turned 18 already, and I was about to graduate. It's something that's definitely affected all of my life. But now that I have a diagnosis and I have kind of like an explanation and a word for my experiences.
Well, it explains how you're different. See, for a lot of people diagnosed later, it's almost a relief because it explains a lot of social issues. But on the other hand, I'm seeing parents overprotect their kid, do everything for their kid, and the amount of kids that have never gone shopping, I think it's just appalling.
It's definitely comforting to have an explanation for why I am the way that I am.
That's good.
But at the same time, I feel like there's this sense of shame because I don't express autistic traits in the way that necessarily everyone else does, because it's such a broad spectrum. And I guess my question for you was there ever like that sense of shame around your diagnosis? And
people
how did
thought
you...
I was stupid. I had a diagnosis as stupid because I couldn't do math. And one of the things that motivated me when I worked on the project shown in the HBO movie when I was in my 20s, I wanted to prove to people I wasn't stupid.
Yeah, so I guess my question is just, how did you learn to accept that part of yourself and to move on without like that sense of shame when it comes to telling people that you're autistic?
Well, first of all, I don't disclose to everybody. And the other thing is, make yourself really good at something. Find a skill you're really good at, where people are going to appreciate that skill. Because the way I sold jobs is I simply showed off the drawings and showed off the pictures. And then when the internet first started, I put up a web page. DVDs first started, I got into that. Find something you're really good at that's a skill other people want. Now, that scene in the movie where I got the editor's cards, I was writing for that magazine, that really helped my career. That's a real scene that actually happened. And what are you good at?
I'm more of a verbal thinker. I also have aphantasia, so I can't picture things in my head when I'm awake. So I'm really good with writing, and I'm good with art and music.
Okay. Well, and there's a lot of things you can do with that. Now, for your verbal history lover, autistic, one of the areas that's been very successful is what I call quiet specialized retail. And in quiet specialized retail, you work with one customer at a time. New car sales has been very successful. Selling things like phones and printers, selling specialized business insurance, selling bank investment products. This is where the person can help the person, these are complicated products, pick out the right product for them. And you deal one customer at a time. It's not a noisy, chaotic thing. And the verbal thinkers in autism, what I call them the history lovers, they've often been very good at these kinds of jobs. These have been very successful.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I just want to thank, we got them out there for books, right out that door in the glass room. And I just want to thank everybody for coming.